This podcast is part of the C-Suite Radio Network, turning the volume up on business.
Welcome to the Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer. Join us as Deb talks with her guests, experts in their fields, as they share real-life stories and techniques to power up your business.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And today we're going to be talking about many things to really make your business successful from a legal perspective. And it's funny because, a lot of things people ignore. They forget, they don't even know that they need to be doing some of these things. And so that's why it's so much fun that I'm going to be talking with Dianna Stallone today. So welcome, Dianna.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, this really is going to be great. And so let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we'll just jump into this.
All right.
So Dianna Stallone is a corporate and litigation attorney with over 25 years of experience representing businesses and entrepreneurs. She has worked at 3 elite law firms and is currently the managing attorney for the Senior Partner Law Group in New York City. She is a trained mediator and author of several books dedicated to helping entrepreneurs navigate today's complex legal landscape, including the Legal Reference Guide for Entrepreneurs. We're going to be talking about that book. She also has an online course instructing entrepreneurs how to negotiate like a lawyer. Attorney Stallone has a long history of advocating for civil and human rights. She is a former civil rights commissioner and has served on several boards, including the Lawyers International Human Rights Committee and Youth Futures International, an international nonprofit promoting youth community service and education. She was also the recipient of the American Jurisprudence Award for Intellectual Property. So again, Dianna, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me, Deb. It's a pleasure to be here.
This is going to be so much fun. And it really, it's one of those things that I think is so important. And that is making sure that you are doing business the way you should be doing business, and taking the steps to make sure that your business is protected, that it is set up correctly, and doing that right at the very start. We talk with a lot of people on this program about setting up a business. And one of the things that I always tell people is, one of the people you really absolutely should be consulting is an attorney. You want to make sure it's set up correctly. You want to make sure that you have everything in place, again, so that somebody doesn't come along and take your business, or heaven forbid, you get sued. Have you protected things so that your house doesn't go to somebody, all of these various things, even just your name of the business. And so that's why we're going to have so much fun talking with Dianna today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and I've addressed some of those issues because one of the things I noticed that I belong to a bunch of entrepreneur groups and women helping other women and sort of, and one of the things I noticed is that sometimes entrepreneurs or people will have an idea for a business,
right,
and they just become so overwhelmed about, like, they don't really know where to start.
Right.
And they're also just scared to, like, it's hard for them to conceptualize of how they make that idea into something real.
Right.
And it's really not that difficult. It really isn't.
Right.
But I do think that in today's world where every aspect of your business is likely regulated in some way, in ways that you would never guess. So it really creates a lot of hidden landmines that people can very easily step on without ever knowing that there's even a problem there. Because, I think a lot of entrepreneurs they're smart enough to realize if I see a problem, I'm going to try to avoid it. Unfortunately, a lot of these landmines are hidden, and you really don't even know that they're regulated, that the process that you're about to do. For example, you want to hire somebody and you want to put a advertisement in the newspaper or in Craigslist or whatever to hire someone, you don't realize that advertisement is regulated by law. what you
Wow.
can say and what you can't say.
Mhm.
And then when you go to hire somebody, what you can ask them.
Oh,
The
yeah.
interview is also
Lots of things there. Mhm.
so there's, or even what you can have on your actual written employment
Right.
application.
Mhm.
So I think that what's happened is that it's become so overregulated that, and I think for well-meaning reasons,
Right.
but at the same time, it really puts entrepreneurs in a position where they can feel really overwhelmed, and they can also get themselves in a lot of
Right.
trouble.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, I think that the fact that legal representation has become so unaffordable,
Mhm.
it's so outrageous
Mhm.
that the combination of the overregulation and then the inaccessibility
Mhm.
of affordable legal services for people really causing a crisis for
Right.
entrepreneurs. And that's the reason that I did write that book, was
Right.
because I saw that as sort of something that I saw
Mhm.
repeatedly, people coming to me and saying, hey, I did this or that. And I kept thinking, geez, if you had only
Right. If you'd
me
only
before you did
asked.
that,
Mhm.
before you did that. But again, a lot of times it was something that they really just didn't think that the law even applied to.
Right.
Like they didn't even think that there was, I mean, a lot of times if people say, oh, I have a big contract to sign, they know, okay, I should probably have a lawyer looking at this.
Right.
But for things like, choosing your name or deciding how to hire somebody and saying the person says, hey, I'd like to work as an independent contractor. And you say, oh, that works for me. And you think, oh, I'm all good.
Right.
And only realize, wow, you got slapped with a huge fine.
Yeah,
from the
because
Department
they
of
were
Labor.
basically an employee. Mhm.
That's right.
Mhm.
And in some states, they take most states actually take a dim view of this. And in fact, this is one of the issues that I want to address at some point, is that the business community, I think, does need to step up.
Right.
And we're going to have to start doing some advocacy about how these laws are affecting small businesses and entrepreneurs. And I'm not sure that a lot of chambers of commerce or other organizations that traditionally represent businesses, I'm not sure that they're necessarily really taking that task on. Because, well, if they are doing it, they're not doing a very good job, because these laws are becoming increasingly punitive, and they really are causing all kinds of problems for both people who are now newly out of their jobs, and you're seeing a whole bunch of people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s getting thrown out of their jobs, and particularly people in their 60s and 50s, they're never getting employed again. And so, but they have a skill, and so they want to market that as an entrepreneur. And they want to, a lot of times people won't hire them, but they will hire them as an independent contractor. So when you put the squeeze on that relationship, you really can cause a huge problem for both people who need to make money and survive, and small businesses who really don't want to have the kinds of burdens that come with having an employee.
Right.
And so these regulations, they are well-meaning. It's really designed to stop employers from taking advantage of people. But it can have an opposite effect. And I think we need to find a balance there. And I do think that part of what we need to do as the business community is kind of step up and start showing some other perspectives, because there's also one of the things that's driving this desire to punish employers is the desires of states to have revenue.
Right.
It's a revenue maker for people.
Because in many cases they're not getting the taxes that they should.
Right. And also the people who are in these enforcement agencies, their job is to collect money from you. And that's how they get evaluated. So because the law is very discretionary in most instances, you can be well assured that they will exercise their discretion in a way that's going to require you to pay money, because that's how they get evaluated.
Right.
What did they bring in? And so I think that's whenever you start thinking about government and its relationship to people, I don't think the government really should be looking at us as prey, or as, really, I mean, the idea,
almost how can they hurt us as opposed to how can they help us?
And that it needs to be, that relationship needs to be adjusted a little bit to make it so that we have a fairer shot at making sure that we structure our relationships in a way that's fair. And I'm not suggesting we should allow people to take advantage of other people. In fact, I'm a big advocate of not doing that for a lot of reasons. Actually from both sides, but also to understand that that government has its place, and some regulations are required, but that we need to find the right balance in terms of making sure that we allow people to structure their relationships in a way that's going to work for them in today's world.
Right. Let's talk more about independent consultants. I'm an independent consultant. And I know that a lot of our listeners and our viewers are people who are independent consultants. You know, they go in, they do X, and that's, you know, that's pretty much all they do. And, you know, luckily when I set my business up, I actually was working for attorneys. And so I got some pretty good advice from them. But you know, it is things, you know, well, actually, let's take a step back and let's talk about initially setting your business up. Because I think many people, especially now, are doing the side hustle thing, you know, and in many cases, it might have started out as a hobby. You know, they made something and then, they could sell it on weekends and, maybe they could sell even more. Or as you said, you know, it's somebody who is no longer employed full time, but they can consult, you know, whether that was their choice or they aged out or whatever it was, you know, they still want to be working. And so, you know, but they don't want to work full time, you know, whether it's, again, their choice or, you know, the choice of employers. They just don't want to, you know, 40 hours a week is not going to be happening. So I always tell people, you know, set it up right at the start rather than having to go backwards. And so if you think that somebody's going to pay you for what you're doing, then maybe you need to set up as a business. And it's funny, when I initially set up my business, this was over 20 years ago, there was no internet. And so I had to trot my little self down to the Colorado Secretary of State, you know, and I had researched it, you know, and I knew what I was supposed to do. And I paid them like my $30 or whatever it was. And it was so funny because they gave me a piece of paper that was about this big. And that was it. I was a business. And what that was the receipt from their cash machine. And that said, I'm a business. I mean, and I still have that because that actually is kind of the legal thing. Now, obviously it's on their website and all sorts of things, but it was so funny because, you know, here I get this little piece of paper and, you know, I was expecting trumpets and fanfare. I'd started my own business and they're like, next. But, you know, initially, of course, the big thing was, what was I going to name my business? You know, and again, this was before I could Google all of this. And, you know, and so, but talk to us about why it's very important to start off right with a name that is yours.
Well, I see you're pointing to two different things. One is the structure of the business, and what's the proper structure, and the other is the proper name. I think that they come in the first order, that first you want to pick a name. And, you know, what I recommend people do is, and we are very lucky that we do have the internet. I mean, it's a kind of a double-edged sword in that in the old days, if you had the name, unless you were like McDonald's or something. You were pretty much and somebody else had the name, they may never know. Whereas now, if you're doing business online and you're using somebody else's name, it's very possible that they are going to know and that you're going to have some sort of conflicting problem. What I recommend that people do is, you know, when you think about your business name, you have to think about a lot of different things. You want to think about, first, you know, obviously, what is the message that you're sending by the name of your business? I was talking on this forum the other day, and I'm not going to name this woman's business, but she said it was a cleaning business, and it had something like so-and-so's touch. And so she said, I keep getting all these porn messages and stuff. And I was like,
massage therapy, or,
you know, I was like, well, hon, you know, you might want to think about changing the name. So, you know, you're obviously going to think about the message that you're sending out, and how that's going to read the people, and which is why it's a good idea to kind of bounce it off people, because sometimes you don't necessarily think about the connotations that are going to come, or how you might offend somebody. You know, there was another big discussion on the same board about someone had named their thing Boss Babes. And a lot of women, including me, were not happy about that. Or, you know, just, it's like, really? And so you really want to, you know, so there's a lot of reasons to bounce it off somebody else. But so you want to pick, you know, think about why you're picking that name and what connotations that somebody might have. And also think about what your initials might spell. If it spells something, you know, like pornographic, you might want to think about that too. So, you know, you want to think about all those things, but then you really just want to do a Google search and say, who else has this name and what are they using it for? Then I recommend that you go to the USPTO, which is the United States Patent and Trademark Office, which you can access online. And I just want to tell your listeners that be sure that if you do that, you go to the .gov. It's uspto.gov.
Okay.
You always want to go to the .gov website because otherwise you get a whole bunch of scammers who are going to come at you who have somehow managed to do their SEO so that when you type in USPTO, their website comes up and then they've got it very deceptively looking like you're at the official website when you're not. You want to go to the uspto.gov website and you can do a name search right there. It's very simple to do. And you just click it in under it says new search and you can type in the name and say you want to do a word search. And now it'll pull up, it'll say live or dead, and you'll be able to see, does somebody have a trademark on that name? If someone has a trademark on that name, don't even think about using it. If someone has a trademark on a name that's very similar, it may not even be exact, but it may be very similar. You might want to look at, well, what is the service or product that they're doing? Because if it's similar to what you're doing, there's a very good possibility that that name won't be approved if you tried to trademark it. And I do recommend that, I mean, I think that if you're doing your little hobby and you're selling to your friends or whatever, maybe you don't need to spend the money to trademark your name. But so it really is a judgment call. But if you're going to invest real dollars and real time into creating a presence for yourself and making your business known to you and what it is you sell, you don't want somebody else to ride on your coattails and even steal your name, because if you don't trademark it, they can, and they can actually prevent you from using it. So it's very important, and it's, you know, it can be a little bit expensive to do. It's like $275 for a filing fee per category of what it is you want to do. And it can be a little tricky, but you can get a lawyer to do it for probably, you know, $1,000 to $1,500, and then you have to pay. So for a few $1,000s, you can actually trademark your name. And it really is worth doing. So you really want to make sure that the name itself is okay before you even proceed any further, because you want to clear that first. And then a lot of people mistake the fact that if they look for a URL online and that URL is available, they think,
oh, it's available.
And they think, well, that's my name. I've reserved it. And it's like, no, you didn't reserve it. It's not your name. That's your name for your URL, but it doesn't in any way protect you from having other people use your name. They're two separate things, and a lot of times people are confused about that. But you also want to go online and see, well, what URL is going to make sense for that as well. And if you can reserve that, you should do that too. So just to avoid confusion. But then the second issue is what kind of structure you want that business to have. Did you have a question?
Well, you know, one of the things that I've seen some people do is they pick a similar name, thinking that, okay, well, you'll mistype Walmart and you'll get my company name. Okay, you know, no.
I wouldn't recommend that either.
No.
Yeah,
No.
I wouldn't recommend that either because for the same reason. I mean, if you try to invest in that business or that name, you're going to have somebody coming after you and say, hey, you know, you're too similar to mine. I know that even like Dunkin' Donuts, they had there was another company called Dunkin' Dip, and they had the same colors and everything, and they were really trying to just sort of ride off the coattails of that other company, and they did get sued for that. I don't know what the result of that lawsuit was. I seem to recall the judge in that case, and I'm not going to comment about what I thought about that judge. But so I don't know whether, you know, his rulings on the case were appealed or not. But I'm just saying, doing that is not a good. It's really something I would just avoid.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to be wasting your money having to defend that.
No.
You know, and in some cases, I mean, one of the easiest things is to use your name. You know, now granted, there's we very rarely is it that you are the only one. There are actually like 4 Deb Creers. It's very amazing.
Really?
But yeah, so you do need to look at that. And that was one of the things I had thought about when I started my business, which my company is Wise Women Communications. And I
Great name.
that was one of the hardest things for me to come up with, was what was my, did I want to use my name? Did I want to, but then I thought, oh, that kind of limits. Did I want to use Denver, Colorado, Rocky Mountain, something? And again, I thought that's too limiting. And now it's funny, what people ask me is, can stupid men do business with us? Yes. But yeah, it was something that I thought a long time about. But I also, one of the things that was a big consideration was, I do want to work with women-owned businesses. And so that was part of that name. But yeah, it was, that really was, a big consideration for me, was, what was it going to be?
Yeah, so I think that, getting the name things situated, that it's sort of a good place to start. Like what, I mean, obviously before that, you're going to be thinking about, who do I want to serve? What value am I going to bring? What makes me unique? Who's my client? All of that stuff before you conceptualize it in the business. But once you've got all that down, you want to say, okay, what's the name of that going to be? And is it going to be appropriate? And then kind of get that nailed down so that you're okay with that. Then you have to decide, okay, well, what is the structure that I want for this business? And you basically get to choose between like 5 different structures.
Right.
And just I have on my my Smart Entrepreneur, I have a Facebook page for entrepreneurs. It's called The Smart Entrepreneur 360. And you can look it up. And on that website, or on that Facebook page, I have a short video in which it's a free video. Anyone can look at it. And it basically goes through the 5 different types of business structures that you can have. And I analyze that. And here's you need to analyze each structure from 3 perspectives. First, you want to know, how easy is this structure to create and maintain? Like, what documents am I going to need?
Okay.
How much am I going to have to pay every year to maintain it? What documents do I need to maintain in order to make sure that that structure stays intact? You want to know, how hard is this to create and maintain? Secondly, you want to know, what is this going to do to protect me and my personal assets?
Right.
Like, what effect will this have, and how well will this protect me and my assets if I adopt this structure? The third thing you want to know is, what are the tax consequences of adopting
and
that
how are you
structure?
going to be filing your taxes?
Exactly. So, rather than go through the, it's kind of boring,
And
actually.
it is a complicated discussion.
It's kind of boring. And, with the new tax law that went into effect, that's part of the reason I did the video, is because the new tax law, affected all of those relationships. And so I wanted to do something I was pretty proud of myself, because I did not only the video, but I did what's called a little video scribe, where it's like a whiteboard animation.
Oh, cool.
And I created it myself, and I was really proud of myself.
Yay.
I felt like it was so complicated that you really needed something visual to kind of help you. And then I also created a PDF that you can download that actually has the information there. So you should be all set with that. So I don't want to go over it like too much in detail here.
And there is a little bit of difference from state to state. That's the other little thing that throws you. It's like, well, wait a minute, you could be a sole proprietor, such and such and so on. Okay, well, that's not available in this state. And it's like, oh.
Well, and I think that that does make it a little bit tricky. And I think it makes it tricky to be kind of giving out advice sort of over the internet or in any way. But I was careful to indicate, that there are some state differences, but there are some general things that are typical that you will see from state to state. And generally speaking, especially if you want to be a consultant of some kind, I do recommend that you incorporate your business in some way, either as a limited liability company or as a subchapter S corporation are kind of the 2 most common. And I think in today's world, the LLC probably provides, in most states, the most flexibility for you from a tax perspective. and also protects you from
Mhm.
liability, assuming that you know, and it's pretty easy to start up.
Right.
And so the LLC is often a very good structure for, you know, people who are providing professional services or
Right.
small goods especially professional services on a consulting basis.
Right.
Now, if you are a professional, for example, a lawyer, somebody who requires state licensure, then you might have to form a professional corporation or a professional limited liability company. And then there may be some hoops that you need to jump through in order to prove that you actually have the proper licensure and all of that in your state. But generally speaking, if you want to provide services as a consultant to somebody, I do recommend that you don't go as a sole proprietor, which you can do. I mean, you literally can go down to Vistaprint and create a business card for yourself, think of a name and say, I own this business and I'm the president of it.
Right.
You know, that it's really that simple. It's just that, you know, if you want to protect yourself from liability, you know, you might want to think a little further about that. But also, there's a risk involved of you getting hired by someone as an independent contractor if you don't have your own company.
Right.
Then there becomes this issue of, and it could still be an issue, you know, of whether or not you're legitimately an actual business that provides this service to a bunch of different businesses, or if you're really somebody's employee masquerading as an independent contractor.
Right.
And that can create consequences for both you and the employer. And in my view, you know, I teach seminars on, you know, how to avoid legal landmines, and sometimes I have to choose, okay, what are the 5 biggest landmines that I think people will step on? This is one of the 5 that I choose. Yeah. That you mischaracterizing your employee as an independent contractor can have devastating, catastrophic effects. A person gets hurt. Let's say, you know, they're on their way to go do something for your company and they get hurt.
You had workers' comp for them.
That's right. And you didn't they're not covered under your workers' compensation. Guess who's going to pay for their medical bills? Right. And their disability. If they lose both of their legs and they can't work for the rest of their life, their lost wages are your responsibility. We're talking about catastrophic liability. And now on top of that, the Department of Labor will come down on you with a big fine.
Right. And they're going to look at everybody else you've got.
That's exactly
more than likely, if you
That's
do it with one, there's others.
That's right. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is that they think, well, I want you to be an independent contractor and you want to be an independent contractor. And since we agree, we're good to go. And that's just not the way the law looks at it. And so, like I said, this is one of the biggest legal landmines is that the law takes an objective view. And this does vary from state to state. So some states are to the extreme, like Massachusetts is an extreme state insofar as basically if you don't own that company and provide that same service to multiple different people, you are almost certainly going to be considered an employee. For example, I'm an attorney. I have my own business and I provide legal services to a bunch of different people. I am clearly an independent contractor as to those people. I own a professional service business, and you know, and no one's ever going to say she's your employee unless I worked for you exclusively. But when you look at and the other factor that's important is that the people that I'm providing that service to, they're not in the business of providing legal services.
Right. Yeah. So it's clear they have to hire someone else.
Right. So the court is going to look at, are you providing the service, the essential service that business provides? If you are, you may very well be considered an independent or an employee. And the court doesn't care what you call yourself, and they don't care whether the person agreed. They basically say, we're going to look at this objectively. We're going to make a decision based on these factors. And if you are, you're going to get nailed. And a state like New Jersey has taken the position, we're going to fine you $5,000 a day for a violation. And the governor basically said, we're going to either make you comply or we're going to put you out of business.
Right.
We'd prefer to make you comply, but if we have to put you out of business, we will.
Right.
And again, what's driving this is their desire for those tax dollars. Now, it's one of those things where they can say, well, we really don't want people to take advantage of you and not provide you with, the proper services and proper insurance. And I think that that's, of course, legitimate.
Right, that is a factor.
But what's under it is the desire to have that matching, the FICA and the unemployment insurance, and making sure, of course, that you have workers' compensation insurance. So those are huge things. And like I said, I recommend if you're in the position to really decide, well, what kind of structure do I want, especially if I'm going to work with somebody? Should that be a general partnership? Should it be a limited liability partnership? Rather than me try to explain it here, there's a great video in which I've taken pains to do that. Facebook Smart Entrepreneur 360.
Perfect. I love it. Well, and it's funny, I have this discussion with clients at least once a year, and because one of the, and usually it's when they have to send me a 1099. And, and so, they will say, what's your social security number? And I say, nope. I have a federal tax ID number.
Right.
And folks get that. Doesn't cost anything. And plus you don't want your social security number out there. I mean, let's just be honest, and so I tell them, no, I am a limited liability corporation. I am incorporated, in my case, in the state of Colorado. I have a federal tax ID. And, and they will say, well, but, and I'm like, no, and then we want to send you a 1099. I'm like, okay, you can send me a 1099. I said, but do you send it to Office Depot? It's the same thing. I mean, they're a company, I'm a company. You don't need to do that effort. Now they want to do it more to make sure that they're in compliance with everything. But yeah, I have that discussion every year with at least one or two clients to say, I'm not giving you my social security number. Now granted, I might be the only person in Wise Women Communications working with them.
It doesn't matter.
But that, so I'm all they see, but I'm like, no, that doesn't matter.
No, and you definitely you're going to need, if you're going to have an incorporated entity or a limited liability company, you're going to be required to get a federal tax ID number for that company anyway, and you definitely want to do that. And the other thing I would recommend is when you're interacting with people, you do so under the umbrella of that company.
Yeah, my invoices say Wise Women Communications LLC.
That's right. And your letterhead says that, and that's how you that's how because they're going to be doing business it's business to business. And so so for example, I would not, I don't send you an invoice from me personally. You get an invoice from my company. Right. And the same, you should do that too. You really have to start thinking about your company as, I own a business and it's separate from me. Right. And you want it to be separate from you because that's how you're going to protect yourself from your personal assets from being. And one of the other key things that I'm going to mention here to maintaining that protection is that you always want to make sure that you have a separate bank account.
Oh, yes.
For that company, and that you keep the finances, you don't commingle your finances. Right. So when the invoices come in, it comes in to the company. Now that company is allowed to pay you. Right. That's fine. You can take that money, but it has to come into the business first. Yeah. Okay. And then if you have what's called a pass-through entity, meaning a LLC who is elected to have pass-through for tax purposes, or a subchapter S corporation, then it's not going to matter. It's going to get taxed to you as if it came directly to you anyway. But it still needs to physically go into that bank account, and you really want to keep that separate and make sure that you don't use the credit card at Target or at Walmart to buy your personal things. You can get yourself in a lot of trouble with the IRS if you do it wrong, and it's harder to keep things separate.
And I've said several times on the program, there are many things you can do, but don't mess with the IRS. They will find you, and they will do. And it's so interesting. And as I said, I think we have a lot of the people that are fans of this program who are independent contractors, and and people like that. And I was talking with one person who he was consulting with a company, and as a consultant, He had his own business, all of those various things, but they were about 95% of his business. He
Yeah.
had a desk in their office that
Yeah,
he
that's
was
problem.
at,
Yeah.
and he had business cards. And I said,
those
oh
are all
no,
problems.
danger, danger, danger.
Yeah, no, well, you know more than most people, but those are all three
Mhm.
problems.
Yeah.
If you physically are at someone else's place of business on a regular basis,
Right.
and you have a desk there, one could certainly argue that you're part of their business, and especially if they can exercise any direction and control over your work and when you come in, and they tell you have to come in on a certain day, or you're going to represent yourself as part of their company. Now you're crossing over into the line where the law is going to consider you an employee, and like I said, it can cause you all kinds of problems. And if you get hurt, you're not covered.
Right. Well, and if you're an employee, of course, there are other things. I mean, you have insurance. There's all sorts of things. And then there's also, my understanding is the like number of hours. I mean, all sorts of stuff. And so it's best, especially if you are an independent consultant, really make sure you've covered yourself. Like I go into my clients' offices, but I do not have a permanent desk. I sit at a table somewhere every once in a while. I really don't go in all that often. That's the beauty. And that's why so many people want to be consultants, is we don't have to do that. We can work in our jammies and our sweats, and we can stay home. Or we can go to the beach. I tell people, as long as I have internet, I can work anywhere. But just make sure that you have covered yourself. And again, that's why this is so important, because I think so many people really are thinking, hey, I can just kind of do this as a little extra work. When I first started my business, what happened was a former employer contacted me and said, can you come back and help us with some stuff? And
That's
luckily,
how it often starts.
I was smart enough to know, let's do this the right way. And then, of course, what I thought was, well, if they need me to do this, maybe other companies do too. And so that really was, what my thought process when I did
so
that.
You have the entrepreneurial mindset.
I do.
That's all it takes.
Well, I tell people, in another life, I think I was an attorney. And one of the things I think people, they always think, I won't get caught.
Right.
And now, granted, there are people who are deliberately being deceptive. Those are not the people we're talking to. We're talking to the people who, in all honesty, think it's okay what I'm doing. It's all right, but it's not. And
I want to tell you a quick little story about this. I have clients who, when I tell them, that's not legal, and you're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble if you do that. Their response to me is, well, this is how we've always done it. It's fine.
Oh yes, we've never been caught before.
And I have to tell them, look, the fact that you haven't been caught doing something and punished for
doesn't make it right.
Doesn't translate into it's legal. Okay, my job is to tell you it's legal. You, as my client, are entitled to make business decisions, in one of which is, I'm not going to listen to my lawyer.
Right.
You're entitled to do that. If you do it too often, I'm likely to say,
you find somebody
not
else.
Your lawyer, because it puts me on the defensive that I have to be saying, oh no, I definitely told you that. Like the fact that you're doing that does not mean that I gave it the okay. And so, we all make calculated risks. Am I going to do that? Am I going to? It's kind of like, if you drive, 60 miles.
Can I go 5 miles an hour over?
Yeah, it's like, well, we all make those kind of calculations, and we're not all necessarily to the letter of the law on every little thing we do. You might cross not at a crosswalk. We all make those calculations, and I, as the client, you're entitled to do that. As the lawyer, to me, it's either legal or it's not.
Right.
Or if it's a gray area where it's not clear if it's legal, I'm going to tell you that too. Because sometimes it's not clear, and those are kind of the tough cases. But that's the nice thing about having a smart client and having a good relationship with that client, where you sit down and talk to them in a way that they understand.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I think that lawyers are at fault for is that and this is very weird to me too, because we're trained communicators.
Mm-hmm.
Lawyers have a tendency to communicate in a way that is not understandable by people.
Right.
I
It's like
cannot tell
doctor
you
speak.
how many times people say to me, they'll say, oh, you're a lawyer. And then they'll say, oh, my lawyer told me this. What did he mean? And it's like, well, your lawyer should have explained to you.
Why didn't you ask them for clarification?
Well, I think people can be intimidated by lawyers. And to be honest with you, I think that some lawyers like that, where they get off on it a little bit. And so they talk way up here. And I think they really do people a disservice when, to me, if this is your business and you are going to be either involved in some sort of risk or even a major decision of any kind, it is imperative that you understand what goes into making that decision and why that decision is made and why you think that's the right decision. Because to me, you're supposed to really, as your advisor, I'm going to be very clear with you about what my thought process is about what I think you should do. I mean, that's what you pay me to do. But you're still the decision maker, which means you need to understand and have a good sense of, here's the risk and here's the benefits. And yes, I'm on board with that decision and why. I think that, and this is one of the things I'm going to tell you as a small business owner. One of the things that you don't realize is how valuable your business is to lawyers. A good business client is worth its weight in gold. Lawyers, just imagine a children's birthday party where there's like a piñata filled with candy and it splits and then the kids are running to get it. These are lawyers with business clients. They are, just so valuable. And so it's important that you recognize the value that your business brings to that lawyer and how important it is and why you have a right to expect that you receive a certain kind of attention and service and proper communication from your lawyer. Your lawyer needs to respond to your phone calls. Your lawyer needs to answer your questions. And your lawyer needs to not be doing things that you don't understand. You must. But it is, a lot of times, in fairness, I'm not sure, if I'm speaking face to face to somebody, I may think I'm being very clear. But if I'm face to face with them, I can see, maybe that person doesn't quite, because people tend to want to agree. Oh, okay. But really
we do the nodding thing.
But so if you're communicating face to face with someone, you can often tell, and then you can backtrack and say, now, did you understand that? Are you sure you understand? If you're on the phone, you might not necessarily know that. So it's important for you as an entrepreneur, the small business owner, to speak up when you don't understand something and recognize that you have a right to know. That's what you're paying.
You're paying them.
That's right. And you're probably paying a lot. The other thing I think it's important to know, though, which is sort of the other side of this coin, is that your lawyer's in the business of giving advice for a fee. Which means that when you're on the phone with your lawyer, that's not the time to chat about politics or, Now, for myself, I tend to have close relationships with my clients. And, to the extent that my client's going to talk to me about, oh, my daughter went to I'm obviously not going to charge them for the time I spent on the phone with them. But a lot of lawyers will be like, I picked up the phone at this time and I closed it at that time, and you're getting charged by the hour for every minute, every text message you send, every email you send, every document that you send for them to look at. A lot of times people think, well, it's only when my lawyer produces something tangible for me, a written contract or a letter, that then I get charged for that. And it's like, no, that's the least of what you do. You're getting paid. That's what you're getting paid for.
And of course, what's important is to understand that relationship, because there are some things where it might be a flat fee, that they're going to charge you. Okay. That's one thing, but and so just know what it is, and I think that's one of the things that, we get intimidated. They're a lawyer, they're a doctor, they have all this knowledge. Well, they also are relying on us to tell other people that they were good, go to them, all these various things. And so it's okay. And let's be honest, they want to be giving you good support and good advice.
Right.
You know,
Definitely.
and so when there's confusion, when there's whatever, it's okay to ask for clarification. You know, and you know, even if it is just, okay, wait a minute, I don't know what you just said. You know, it doesn't mean that you're not intelligent, that you know, it just means,
Right.
you know, and it's kind of like industry jargon. You know, the other day somebody was saying something to me and I said, what? I have no idea what that word means. And he went, oh, okay. You know, and he said, oh, it means this and that. Okay, that's fine. But he was so used to doing the industry jargon that it never occurred to him that wasn't something he should do.
Right. And I have two things to say about this. In my book, I have a section on how to get the most out of your relationship with your lawyer.
Cool.
And the reason I put that in there, and I put information in there about how to evaluate your lawyer's business, billing practices, and how to communicate best with your lawyer, and even how to select a lawyer. Because I think it's really, this is such a fundamental relationship, and it's so important that it's important that you understand that you're going to get the most out of your money for your lawyer, and you're also going to make sure that you get billed fairly.
Right.
So that's one thing. The other thing is about when you are, you know, an entrepreneur and you're doing some sort of business, you must understand everything that you're signing. And this is probably when I get to choose, okay, what are the top legal landmines? This is one of the other legal landmines that I identify with, is you need to understand your contract. And I think you talking about jargon is what kind of brought this to my mind, is that lawyers automatically put in, and I have to admit I do too, because it's the standard, put all kinds of legal jargon into your contract.
And sometimes they have to. I mean, it's
Exactly.
yeah.
That's why I'm saying I do it too. And if you look at one of my contracts, it contains all of these legal jargons. One of the things I did in my book was I actually went through some of the more common phrases that there's a whole section on contracts and how to understand contracts, how to sign a contract properly, and you know, what kind of things you need to look for in a contract. Because, you know, a couple things. One is, just to back up, you want to negotiate your best deal before you put it in writing. You want to make sure that you want to make sure that what goes into that writing is your best deal. It's very important that you understand, and I think it's so easy to do this wrong. I know, I even as a lawyer, I've been practicing law for a long time, I'll even find myself tempted to do this. You have a piece of paper, you're talking to somebody face to face, and they say, okay, well, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and they say, here's our standard contract, and they give you the contract. And you look at the contract, and some of the things that they said isn't in the contract.
Right.
Or there might even be something in the contract that says the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And they'll say,
There's
oh,
extras.
that's just our standard language. You know, this is the way we do it. This is the way we do it.
It's all right.
It's very important that you understand that the law looks at that piece of paper, the contract, as if it's like the Holy Grail. I mean,
It's in stone.
It is. If it's in the contract, you're bound by it. So it's very important that you make sure that you don't agree to things that you can't possibly do, you can't possibly comply with. So you're already in breach of the contract before you start. Or you don't get what you absolutely need from the other side.
Right.
If you're not getting it and it's not in the four corners of that contract, you don't have it legally.
Right.
And it's very important. I want to just take a moment to mention notice requirements in contracts.
Okay.
Almost always when you have a contract, they'll say this contract is going to go until such and such a time unless you notify us within 30 days of blah, 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 that it's going to end. I want you to take your highlighter out and highlight that section of that contract. And when you get the contract, you put that notice in your diary. You get out your phone and you get yourself a little reminder, whatever you need to do, tell your secretary, your wife, your husband, whatever, you make sure that you know when that notice needs to be given. But if that notice says you will give notice by getting on a camel and going to Saudi Arabia and having something earmarked, postmarked from Saudi Arabia within 90 days, but 60 days before, whatever it says, that's what you have to do.
Right.
To the letter. If you don't do it to the letter, you didn't end that contractor. You didn't, whatever the notice required, you are not getting it. And I tell people this story that, because this happens to people, is that I had a client who was an artist, and he was a great guy, and he had a manager who was kind of incompetent, and but they have a very close relationship day to day. You know, you're an artist, you have a manager. So he decided he wanted to replace his manager, and he told his manager, look, your contract is coming up, and I'm not going to renew your contract. He took him out for lunch, and he said, look, you know, it's nothing personal, blah, blah, blah.
Great.
And the manager said, oh, no problem. That's not a problem. And he then went out, and he got a new manager, and he signed a new contract with a new manager, obligating himself to pay 10% of his income to the new manager. And a couple of days after the term expired, his old manager called him and said, great, I'm glad we'll be working together. And it cost him a lot of money. Now, and it's, I mean, and he's like, what are you talking about? I took out for dinner, we had this, and he said, well, it said you had to give me written notice, and you didn't. And I got him out of that. But the only reason I got him out of that, and it cost him plenty of money to get him out of it, but the only reason I got him out of it is because the manager had also violated some of the terms of the contract. And because of the specific relationship, he's the manager, it's his job to make sure that his client complies with his contracts. So by doing that, he had violated what we call a fiduciary duty. So because of the special relationship, we were able to get him out of it. But if you don't, you could be stuck paying the old guy for 10% and the new guy too. So it's very important that you make, because it's so easy to see how you could make that mistake, especially if you have a very personal relationship with somebody and you think, okay, we have an understanding. You need to understand that when you're in business, your business relationship is governed by that contract. And you need to understand it and comply with it.
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about contracts, especially for people who provide a service. So someone like me. I have a written contract. Actually, I initially do a written proposal. Now, you know, I've gotten a little bit more loosey-goosey with that, but it might be an email as opposed to you get this document. But you get something in writing that says, for X amount, I will do this and this and this. And then I have a signed contract with my clients. And, you know, and of course I have that because I got burned. You know, now not badly, you know, and it was one of those things that was, you know, it ended up being okay in the long run. But, you know, unfortunately, long gone are the days where we do handshakes. You know, and things change. You know, I worked for an agency many years ago, and we had a client that was a pretty good chunk of their business. And they had been, you know, we'd been, you know, working for them for many, many years. Well, they got a new director of marketing who did not like our firm, you know, and it was just, he wanted his own firm. And so, you know, he looked through and he terminated the agreement, and we went round and round and round with them about that. And, you know, and they kept saying, well, but we're friends. You know, all of these things. It was like, no, you know, and we did have a written contract, you know, and it was one of those things where it, you know, it just, there's nice and there's business, you know, and that's, I think, what so many people forget is, you know, we think that we can do handshake, but it's going to cover everyone and to their benefit if you have a contract.
It really is important. And I think, you know, one of the other provisions in a contract that commonly you'll see in a contract, you will see, and again, I go over this in my book for a reason, is that if your contract says this is the entire agreement, and it can't be modified except for in writing, you can be assured that 99.8 or 9 of all contracts have that in it. Because a lawyer has written it, and a lawyer will
and we have that boilerplate, and we just go merrily along.
But understand how important that boilerplate is, because what will happen is you'll have that piece of paper, And then as time goes on, that piece of paper is long in the drawer somewhere. And now the two of you are having your relationship and you're saying, okay, well, we'll do this time. And okay, we'll do that this time. And it's okay if you don't do that. But the contract says there's no waiver. There are no waivers. You can't waive any of these provisions.
Right.
Be modified. And the person will come to me and say, yeah, but he said that.
Right.
He said this. And here's what I need to tell that person. You see that contract and the four corners of that contract and that clause that says, that integration clause that says this is the entire agreement. What that means is that this is the entire agreement and it can't be modified orally. And the judge is going to look at that and oh, but he said this, isn't that fraud? And I'm going to say to them, listen, understand something. You're not even going to get to tell the judge what he said.
Right.
Because the lawyer,
it doesn't count.
is going to come in advance before you ever get to see the judge and is going to make what we call a motion in limine. And I'm going to make a motion that says, Your Honor, I move to exclude from evidence any oral communications that contradict this contract. And the judge is going to say, granted. You're never going to get to say what he said. You're never going to even get it out of your mouth. So it's so important that you understand that. This is why educating yourself about these legal landmines is so important, because you once get that and you once know that, hey, this can't be modified. He can be just as soon telling you fairy tales, because that's how much legal effect what that person has to say that modifies your agreement. You also need to make sure that the person that you're dealing with, and this is why I always put in my contracts an authority clause.
Yes.
That says the person who's signing this contract on behalf of this corporation has the warrant that they have the authority to sign this contract and to bind the company. Because if you don't have that in there, a corporation is a piece of paper that is governed by certain rules in their bylaws. You don't know what their bylaws say. And the bylaws will say only this person is entitled to sign contract. Well, guess what? If a different person signs your contract and you want to enforce that contract against the company and you don't have the right person signing it, your contract's not enforceable. So it's very important that you make sure that and especially if you're dealing with any kind of government contracts, don't trust anybody. You need it in writing that the person who's signing this has the authority, sign it, sign the city or the state or whoever it is that you're dealing with, because it's very, very important.
And again, most of the time they're not being deceptive. A lot of times it's, well, sure, I'm the director of marketing. I should be able to sign this. I'm going to save time. It'll be easier to do this, and all of those things. It's like, no. And of course, it's especially important when there is money involved. Because, if the person that signed it doesn't have the right to have signed it, then they don't have to pay you.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And it's especially important if you're dealing with any kind of governmental agency, but any corporation or business entity of any kind. You want a statement in there that says this person warrants and represents that they have authority and that they will and that they have the right to bind the company to this contract. And you want that in there. And then when you sign your contract, you always want to make sure you sign it Deb Creer as president or whatever you're of such and so company, so that you're never signing it in your personal capacity. You're always signing your company, your contract.
That's when I'm Deborah.
Whatever it is, and whatever you always look at the signature line, and you want to make sure that signature line, that there's no ambiguity that you're signing it in your personal capacity or of yourself. And that it is you signing it as president or as CEO or whatever you are of that company. And so that you want to make sure that as well.
And again, this is to protect everyone, and most people aren't going to take advantage. They're not going to do those things, but sometimes just simple things happen. I was mentioning, they got a new director of marketing, and the director of marketing had the authority to sign. And he said, nope, I don't like those guys. So it didn't matter in the slightest, because he had the right to do that. And even though they're company president, well, but I like them. No, he had the authority that he could say, I just don't like you guys. And so it's, it really is one of those things. And I can't emphasize it enough, make sure that you have done that, even if it's something fairly simple, it's, again, it's to protect yourself and it's to protect the clients. And so it's very important.
Part of that is when you're negotiating that contract,
right?
Let's say you're going to put up a lot of money or time or effort up front, like for example, in a marketing thing. You then might want to make sure that you pay careful attention to the reasons why this contract can be terminated.
Right.
And you want to maybe specify, well, it can't just be you don't like us.
Right.
Once I've done all the legwork and getting you this, I don't want you to take what I did and now just go and not give me, and not that when the payout day is, 10 days from now, take what I've got and say, well, we don't like you. You really need to pay attention. What reasons can this contract be terminated, and be careful about the way that you protect yourself, that you're not going to get taken advantage of. The other thing I want to mention about contracts is whenever you're entering into a relationship with another person, even an employee or a independent contractor or another business, I think a good example is a marketing partner. If you're gonna give over to your marketing partner, you're gonna say, here's my logo, here's my taglines, here's all my ideas about, and here's my company, here's all our contacts for you to contact. You must get a non-disclosure agreement signed up front. It's so important. And I have to tell you that I just had this dispute with one of my clients recently. He downloaded from the internet an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, and he said, Dianna, can I sign this? And I said, no, I'll give you one. I'll write one for you. And so I sent him back a much more detailed, longer.
Yes. The law firm of Google is not the best option.
And he was really upset that that the one that I was giving him was longer and more complicated. And I said, listen, you need to understand something. The one you have, you literally can throw it in the toilet because it doesn't have any teeth. It doesn't have any remedy if they do it wrong, if they steal your product. And let me tell you something. This has really come home to me because I had a client whose marketing partner literally stole their business. And in fact, went and tried to trademark their name. And actually filed it under their business, went to their client and decided, hell, I could make this business as good as you. Instead of just,
and look, I've got all this stuff.
I've got all your, everything that you do. I've got all your forms, everything, because I'm enrolling your people for you, and I've got all your forms, everything. And I'm just going to change your name, put mine on there, and I'm good to go. It was a huge legal battle over it, but it really did let me know that and bring it home that those NDAs, they need to be legally enforceable. They have to have teeth. They need to be like, there's a consequence for you doing this. And you may not use my information for any reason, directly or indirectly, for any reason other than for my benefit. You can't use it for your benefit, directly or indirectly for a third party's benefit, nobody else's benefit but mine. And when you're done, you're going to give everything to me. The other thing you need to know when you're signing these contracts is that you need to make sure you specify up front who gets the intellectual property of what is created during that contract, or during that relationship. Who owns it? If I make you a logo or design brands for you.
Is it my logo or is it your logo?
You definitely want to be able to walk away with that logo and say, it's mine. These are magic words. They're called for hire. They are literally magic words in the law, in that if you say this is employment for hire, that's a shorthand of saying you're doing this for me and I own it. And you want to make absolutely sure that if you're on that side of it, where you're creating something for someone, you want to know, am I am I giving this artwork over to them? Because if I am, it might be worth more money than if I get to keep it myself.
Right.
And if I want to use it as one of my samples, I might want to get that cleared in advance too.
Well, and I mentioned the fact that I got burned and by not having a well-written contract, and it was exactly with logo design. We had given them 12 samples, different versions and all of this, and they picked one, and that was great, and we went forward, with all that stuff. And then months later, she happened to mention the fact that one of the other designs was being used by her husband. And I said, oh, no, you only bought one. And she, of course, said, well, that's not what it says in your contract. And, and it was funny because he, at that point, was an attorney. And so he and I had a little discussion, and, and I mean, they were right. I had no ground to stand on, but they were nice and they were fair people. And he said, tell you what I'm going to do to pay you for that logo. He said, I'm going to rewrite part of your contract. And, and so what he did was he rewrote the section. So, what happened, and this is in everything, that they get the final version.
Right.
Everything else, all specs, all comps, all drafts, all of that remain mine.
Right.
And that really was just so important. But yeah, I assumed that, well, they liked logo A, that was all they were going to use. Now they were right. I mean, because my contract didn't say it. They actually had all of them.
Right. So I think that, it really goes back to that basic bottom line is that the permutations of how this can rear its ugly head, it all comes down to the same thing, which is read that contract, understand that it's literally the Bible of your relationship, and that it's not, what's in that contract is so important because you are going to be bound by it. And so it's really important that you understand it.
Right.
It's important that you comply with it. And it's important that you've created provisions in there that allow you to force compliance for the other side. And that if they don't, and you have to go after them, that they have to pay your attorney's fee.
Right. Oh yeah,
because
that's the other important part.
A lot of times people will pull I don't want to be political here, so I'm going to think of a different example. When somebody has a lot more power and they basically say, well, I'm just not going to pay you.
Right.
I'm not going to pay you, and it's going to cost you X amount of dollars to fight with me. And even though I don't really have any reason to not pay you, I'm just not going to.
Yeah. Big company X.
A big company, and who routinely does, this is their way of doing
and you're
business.
just this little bug.
That's right. And to just say, well, fight me over it. And then you bring it to a lawyer, and your lawyer's like, all right, you got, $10,000 in dispute here. And they're offering you 5, and it's going to cost you 15.
And you're like, wait a minute, I'm in the hole.
Take the 5. And so, those realities get shifted if you have the proper provision in your client that says that if you violate this contract, you will pay my attorney's fees to come after you to get it. And that changes that dynamic dramatically. And it's actually a very important thing.
Right.
So I think the bottom line is that, it's not that we have to just be so suspicious of everyone. And this is one of the reasons people don't like lawyers very much, is that one of the things we do is first of all, after you've been doing this for a long time, you see catastrophe after catastrophe, and after a while they start to fall within very identifiable patterns.
Right. You can see that coming.
That's right. So you're able to predict disaster before it happens. My job is to look at your situation, predict disaster, and protect you from it in advance.
Right.
Now, you can't always predict every disaster,
No.
but there's a whole universe of disasters out there that have already happened that lawyers have gotten very good at predicting.
Right.
And that's the reason why you see all that complicated language in your contract, is to protect you from those things. It's always better if you don't know what you're doing, if you're not really sophisticated. Spend a little bit of money to have your lawyer look at any important contract that you're going to sign. Because if it's important to you and it's one of your primary relationships that your business is going to rise or fall on it, or really going to be hurt one way or the other, get out your wallet and hire somebody to take a look at that contract. Because some people are very sophisticated and they're actually able to look at it themselves. those people are kind of few and far between.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Right.
have very sophisticated clients who are very smart people who routinely sign contracts that are just like, I can't believe you
You're going-
signed this contract. Like,
Mhm.
why do, and at some point as your lawyer, it's like you want to come to me and say, you know, well, a good lawyer should be able to get me out of anything. And it's
Yeah,
like, well, a good
no.
lawyer is definitely going to be able
Mhm.
to, you know,
Help.
look at every crevice and see, well, where did they violate
Mm-hmm.
the contract, or what could this argument be made? But if you have a bad contract to begin with,
Mhm.
really tying your lawyer's hands and, you know, or making them
Mhm.
work with like one hand behind their back, there's no need to do that.
Mhm.
It really is important. And I can't really stress it enough, the various ways that this can come back and bite you.
Right. Well, oh my gosh, Dianna, we are at the top of the hour. In fact, we went past it, but
Oh, geez.
you know, that's all right. This is, you know, it's very important stuff. And, you know, but more importantly, there were several things that we didn't even get to. You know, I really wanted to talk about sexual harassment,
Oh, yeah.
ageism, you know, because
Yeah.
I work with a lot of people who are in the job market, you know, all sorts of things. And so, you know, we definitely have to have you on again because, you know, whether it's, you know, somebody who is, you know, the employee or the potential employee or the employer, I think there's some, you know, more things that we need to discuss here.
Oh, yeah.
So we will definitely have you on again.
Great.
But until then, how do people find you and connect with you online?
My website is www.seniorpartnerlaw.com.
Perfect. And your book is, of course, on Amazon. You know,
It
and
actually is
it's not.
on
Ah.
Amazon. I typically give that book to my clients.
So they need to contact you and
Yeah, I give that book to my clients. It's not, I didn't write it necessarily to make money, although people have told me you really should put it on Amazon, and I probably will. But for the most part, I wrote it to give to people.
and it is a great resource. You know, I was going through it thinking
the Smart Entrepreneur, the legal reference guide for entrepreneurs is what
Perfect.
it's called.
and it really does go through step by step, many
does.
things, you know, and even if you've been in business for years, it's worth looking at it to make sure that you're still okay. You know,
That's right.
You know, so many of those things we went, we didn't need to do that. Oh, maybe we should have. You know, I've been in business over 20 years, and there are some things that I need to go back and fix.
Well, the thing is, you can look at it and say, oh, I'm going to hire somebody. What does Dianna say about hiring? Or I want a drug test. What does Dianna say about that? So you're not going to read it cover to cover.
Right.
It's really a reference guide. So it's the legal reference guide for entrepreneurs. And you can contact me at www.seniorpartnerlaw.com.
I love it. Well, Dianna, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
You know, I feel like I covered a lot in this, so you've been really great.
We did. We went through a lot of information.
So, you know, a lot of the things I would leave people with were, you know, the essential landmines. Make sure you read your contracts, you understand them. Make sure you get your NDA. Make sure you understand the kind of relationship that you're entering into. Either it's independent contractor or employee, and you want to make sure you set your business up right.
Perfect.
So those are kind of the things. I agree with you that probably the other most important things we didn't get to are things like sexual harassment, which is probably one of the biggest issues in today's business world. So a bunch of those things, discrimination, age discrimination, the family medical leave, all of those things. So I'm glad to come back.
Perfect. We will have you on after the first of the year. You know, and it is an important discussion to have. And so we will be having that. Until then, I am Deb Creer. I've been having an absolutely fascinating time talking with Dianna Stallone. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer. Join us next time for more real-life stories and techniques to power up your business.
You've been listening to C-Suite Radio. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.